Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Electric Vibe podcast. Jay and I are knocking out a couple episodes in one day, and this is a very important one. It actually hits home in the science community. I've mentioned before that my husband is a scientist, and one of his colleagues actually is part and parcel to the event that we're going to talk about today. Jay, can you lead us off with whom we're going to talk to today, please?
I sure can, Kurt. Thanks very much. We're going to be welcoming Dr. Amanda Therrien to the show today. And originally from Canada, Dr. Therrien is a sensorimotor neuroscientist who studies the cerebellum. She's one of the lead organizers of the Philadelphia Stand Up for Science movement that's happening on March 7th in Philadelphia. And we're going to be talking in great detail about the Stand Up for Science movement for 2025. Dr. Therrien is organizing the rally and speaking on our podcast today in her personal capacity, not in her official capacity as a faculty member at Thomas Jefferson University. I'm excited to talk about Stand Up for Science this year. And what is Stand Up for Science anyway? It's actually
Right.
a grassroots operation consisting of over 100 volunteers, all united in their belief that science is for everyone and benefits everyone. And we really are going to talk about all of those aspects in greater detail. Looking forward to welcoming Dr. Therrien to the Electric Vibe podcast.
Okay, sounds good.
Dr. Therrien, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I can call you Amanda too, so what the heck.
Yes,
Yes. So thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. How are you guys doing?
We're hanging in there. So, like I said, Aaron and you, my husband Aaron, and you happen to work together at the same lab. And we've had various conversations about, uh, all different hosts of topics when you and your husband Keith have come over for dinner. Aaron just brought up to me recently, maybe you should have Amanda on to discuss this stand up for science. I said, of course. And as soon as I ran by it to Jay, here we are. We made things work, and thanks for carving out the time in your schedule to do that. We always tell any guest that we have on, we don't take for granted how valuable your time is, but even more importantly, what you do as a research scientist, a sensory motor neuroscience expert, to be more specific. So, can you take us through, Jay? This is usually your line of
It's
question,
usually
but
my
now I
line of
guess I'm
questioning.
wearing. I know you told me to wear the mantle today. So, can you take us through your journey from coming from Canada to coming to the U.S. And why it was important for you to make that journey happen?
Yeah, I wish I had like a really exciting story for you. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm from Canada. I grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, and I went to university there. And then I moved to Southern Ontario to a town called Hamilton. It's a bit south of Toronto for people who might know some things about Canada, maybe not so much. A little bit south of Toronto, and went to graduate school at McMaster University. And then I ended up moving to the United States for my postdoctoral fellowship. I moved to Baltimore to do that at Johns Hopkins University,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I met the aforementioned Aaron.
Yes, you did. Yep.
And and then fate would have it that we would work again together.
It's how it works. So, what? Why the U.S.? Why is science so important to study here in the United States?
Mhm. I mean, so for me personally, um, the thing that I wanted to study, the person with whom I wanted to train was in the United States. And
Okay.
one thing in the United States that is sort of integral, and related to this whole issue of stand up for science is that, the United States has been a leader in science and research throughout the world. I mean, it predates this a little bit, but especially since World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has had to do with a big shift in government support for science,
Right.
especially basic science. And what I mean by basic science is, is not bland or uninteresting, but rather basic science refers to things that are highly mechanistic in nature and things where maybe we don't know exactly yet what the long-term application will be. So you can think of, early physics experiments that led to, the development of the internet and the Wi-Fi network that I'm sure
Hmm.
many of your listeners are utilizing to listen to this
Right.
episode. Um, and so, and the reason why government is so positioned for something like that is because of the risk involved in that kind of investment. It requires a financial entity that can shoulder that amount of risk. We don't know. It takes a lot of tries and it takes a lot of experimentation to get to that stage to
Yeah.
figure out if what is being worked on, how that applies to maybe something you might consider a little bit more real world.
Right.
And so it's really important. Government support for science is really, really important.
Well, and this is a touchy subject, but that government shift has definitely, the narrative has definitely changed. Can you talk a little bit about that and what led you and the folks that you're the leader of this event that's happening at Philadelphia City Hall, and then I want to be remiss if I didn't say it's happening this Friday, March 7th at Philadelphia City Hall, as you can see in the graphics behind me. Starts at 11 and it goes until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Is
Mm-hmm.
that correct? Okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, from the narrative shift of the current presidential administration under President Trump and this event, what was it that led you to wanting to put this together?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say, actually, talking about just to touch on your point about this narrative shift, I do think it's really important to highlight that you know this kind of politicization or kind of movement toward being resistant or trying to censor scientific content and scientists' voices is not new. This goes back through the majority of our history. Galileo was attacked by um, the authorities of his time because his data fundamentally were revealing truths that were inconvenient to the narratives being pushed by the leaders of his time. We've seen this, history is replete with examples where scientific findings kind of counter narratives of the powerful, and even scientists themselves, make their lives have been politicized. Most famously, I think, is Alan Turing, whose work was celebrated for helping stop World War II, but he himself was quite um, he was persecuted basically because of his sexual orientation.
Yes.
And so, this is not new. It's certainly, and it's not unique to the United States. I can tell you, as a
Yeah.
Canadian, I mean, over my course of my lifetime, even like there have been efforts to curb government support of science. And generally speaking, um, the motive is often just because it's inconvenient at times to have data that counters messaging that you want to push. And so sometimes, knowing less is helpful to people in positions of power. Um, but in terms of this particular movement, it's happened very quickly. I really started on Super Bowl Sunday. um,
Wow.
yeah, a group of people online that don't necessarily didn't necessarily know each other before this started to sort of there started a discussion, wondering with all the activity ramping up, and this was even before some of the most sort of drastic, mass layoffs that have happened in the last 2 weeks.
Mm.
Wondering, wait, in 2017, even there were very large movements, that were brought on to counter what I would argue was even less provocation. So people were wondering, why isn't anyone doing anything? Maybe we should do something. And so
Mm.
the movement was born, I think, and it's mostly early career scientists. There are a few of us faculty members on there, but it's been
Mm.
really, really inspiring. And so the event is happening across the United States on Friday.
Excellent.
I am one of the lead organizers, and it's far from alone, working on the Philadelphia event, which, as Kurt mentioned, is happening at 11 a.m. at Philadelphia City Hall. But there are 31 other cities, including Washington, D.C., that are hosting events. There are also
Wow.
a number of other unofficial events, such as walkouts and other actions that are being taken.
Mm.
I'd encourage anyone who's interested to check out standupforscience2025.org. You can find information about an event that's happening near you if you're interested in attending one.
We will make sure on YouTube and of course other formats that we'll have a link for that description below,
Yeah,
so that people
absolutely.
can reach out.
Right.
What can one expect going? I know you can speak for the Philadelphia event. There's a roster of guest speakers
Mhm.
and the topics that they're going to cover? What can we look forward to at that particular event?
Yeah, we have a great. So most events are going to have they're most of them are stationary rallies. They're going to feature speakers. Um, the national rally in DC has a very impressive list of speakers that they will be releasing very soon. In Philadelphia, we have a mix of speakers as well. It's a mix of local government officials,
Hmm.
academics, and advocates in the region. There will also be opportunities for advocacy activities. So we'll have a petition going around that is relevant to an issue that is local to Philadelphia, specifically asking the leading institutions in the area to sort of make a publicly reaffirm their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs.
Mm.
Um, because as of yet, there has been no law passed stating that they have to uh, take away those programs. And so, there are ways to be, what we kind of call creatively civilly disobedient.
Mhm.
And so we're sort of trying to promote that. But it should be a fun event. We're expecting a pretty large turnout. The goal is a peaceful, positive celebration of science to try to help not only, the message, I think the whole movement that we want to convey is that, this isn't an issue of a bunch of eggheads sitting in our towers, that are just mad because someone's taking money away from us. This is born out of legitimate concern
Hmm.
uh, for the long-term effects that even a reasonably short-term disruption to the science infrastructure can have for
Oh my.
many, many sectors of society.
Certainly. Right.
Yeah.
Not just
Doctor,
a neuro. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
it's okay. If I can ask, in looking at the
Mhm.
literature for Stand Up for Science 2025, I was captivated by the tagline of that science is for everyone and benefits everyone. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yes. So central to our demands is this issue of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility that is really central to science. It's not just a nice tagline. It's true both for scientists
Hmm.
and the broader public. So, for example, within the domain of academia, academia actively selects against many, many demographics. Um,
Hmm.
and so diversity and inclusion initiatives within academia are necessary to make sure that women, minorities, individuals with different ability
Hmm.
status can succeed and have accessibility to science as a career if they so want it. Additionally, science has a long history, scientific research has a long history of excluding certain demographics in its data collection. Even now, um, even now, crash test dummies in cars are based on male physique. They are not based on women's bodies. We do not use those, which is why for any woman who drives a car, I can tell you myself, they're not designed for people with ponytails. They're not designed for, airbags are not designed for people with different bodies. These are sort of real world consequences of a lack of active sort of what you would call is sort of the definition of affirmative action for um, diversity. And so these things have real consequences. It's not just a sort of make everybody feel nice moment.
And with having or events such as this, are you seeing over the course of the past few years subtle changes to this narrative?
To the narrative, am I seeing subtle changes to the narrative that uh, am I seeing subtle changes to increasing inclusion? Is that what you're
Yes,
asking?
yes. Mhm.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, this is the thing is that it has improved a lot. And I think what people need to understand is that that is because there have been specific initiatives put in place to force it to do that, um, that, taking these things away is not going to it is just going to regress back to kind of everything just being about a very specific demographic, a very specific type of person. And um, when left to their own devices, this is just what happens. And so I think that it's important to remember that we people. I study in my field. I study learning. I study behavior change, and I can tell you, even our brains, it's very hard to get people to change their behaviors.
Mm,
You have to actively incentivize it.
Mhm.
mm.
And when you take those active incentives away, people generally, it stops happening. And it's not necessarily out of malice. It's not necessarily out of um, in, purposeful ignorance. It's it's just kind of a passive process that happens, and we need to be aware of that to mitigate the effects of it.
Sure.
But the main one of the main concerns is that I see, and of course I'm not in the field directly, but living with somebody who does do this for a living,
Mhm.
is this whole mentality of what does this button do, and what if I break this wire? That the tearing apart of different governmental systems that seems to have just overwhelmed the
Mhm.
system, and you having to walk on eggshells. I mean, many people don't realize that a lot of scientists are based off of soft income, and that is
Mhm.
grant based. I'd say, what was it, 60% or more of a lot of research scientists such as yourself are working
Mhm.
off of grant monies. And when there are freezes that happened all of a sudden, you're not sure what where the
Yeah, this is
environment
the
is going.
thing. I've been asked, are you worried about, your involvement in this movement? Are you worried about any repercussions on your career? And,
Yeah.
you know, and my point, it's spending time thinking about it. I kind of have two answers. Like the first is, the most proximal, which is I am in a soft money position, which means not only do I need research grants to pay for my research and for to pay the salaries of the trainees who work in my laboratory, but I also pay my own salary.
Right.
So if we get rid of science funding and there's no grants, I mean, I don't have a job anyway. Um, but on the other side of it, sort of, which I think was more the intent of the question, but
Mm.
um, you know, yes, it's possible that speaking out can have negative effects. That's always a risk that you
Mm.
take on, and none of us involved in this movement have taken that on lightly. Um, but I also really feel that maybe, if it turns out to be a detriment to me, but the end effect is that in some tiny, small way, I played a role in keeping an opportunity open for other people, then, that was just kind of, I'm okay with that. And that was the decision that we had to come to.
Sure.
Right.
But with the difficulties of just the unknown,
Mhm.
in terms of funding, I also, people who are not necessarily in your position that would clap back with, "Oh, well, why don't you just get corporate funding?" And a lot of times I then answer, and I'm sure you can expound on this better than I can, but a lot of times those corporate interests, PACs, super PACs, have their own, such as, big pharma or the military. What can why don't you just, side with these companies? The drug companies do. And it's like, well, there's not really a neutral party involved in that
Yeah.
decision making. So,
Yeah. So that's part of it. Absolutely. I also, again, it all comes down to the level of risk, and by risk I mean financial risk,
sure.
that really is very large in the scientific enterprise. And this is what this is what I was saying before. The reason really only governments are big enough to be able to sort of take
Hmm.
on that level of risk. And this is why it's been integral. And I think this is, I hope, what people will learn. I always encourage people, just read history books. It's important.
Yeah.
That you know the reason why the U.S. is in the position it is in terms of particularly biomedical research, is because of the the intensive government investment in it.
Mm.
The other thing to remember, a little bit to your point, Kurt, it reminds me of some of the arguments that have been put out,
Mm.
um, with in relation to some of some of the funding cuts, particularly with the NIH, so the National
Hmm.
Institutes of Health in the United States,
Yeah.
um, have sort of used private industry and private organizations as a comparison point to say, well, they only provide so much money. And in particular, this has been brought up as an argument with
Mm.
respect to cuts to what's called indirect costs.
Okay.
Um, and I can explain more about those if you would like. But
Sure.
one thing to remember is part of the reason why companies can control things a little bit more,
Hmm.
um, and can offer maybe smaller amounts of money, particularly for indirect support,
Hmm.
is because the government backs so much of it. This was
Hmm.
not, it's not really an apples to apples comparison
Yeah.
in many ways. Yeah.
Doctor, do I understand that this is it 100% volunteer coordinated and driven, the Stand Up for
The
Science
Stand Up for
2025?
Science?
Yes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yep.
And can
Yep.
you
We are
talk,
all, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, can you talk a little bit about the passion that the volunteers have for this program and some of the things that you're seeing as the event gets closer?
Yes, we have an incredible, incredible, incredible team of people. It's hundreds of people to man something like this across the country. I think for me, at this stage, the thing that has been the most incredible to me and the most encouraging is the number of students that are doing this. Young, like young, really young people,
Mm.
Mm.
um, standing up and saying, okay, the big kids aren't doing it, so we're going to do it.
Mm.
And I just think that
Mm.
that's incredible. It's just so, it's been really, really motivating to get the rest of us in gear. Yeah.
Who specifically in the public officials are slated to lend their support and visible support or visible support to the Stand Up for Science in Philly? Is there anybody that's like,
And Billy,
yeah, is there anybody, government officials or anybody that's coming out to, or at least planning on coming out to speak on behalf?
Yeah, so we have been really lucky in Philadelphia to have been able to work very closely with our city council
Oh, good.
on this event, which I'm incredibly grateful for and really appreciative of. They have been a huge help in getting this off the ground. So in particular, we have three city council members. Jamie Gauthier is a city council member for the third district, which includes West Philadelphia. So that's for people familiar with Philadelphia. That's where University City is. And we have Nina Ahmad, who is a council member at large. She is actually has a PhD in chemistry, which is pretty cool, and is a former
Okay.
assistant professor.
Oh,
And we have Nicholas O'Rourke, who is also a council member at large. And all three of them will be speaking. They have been very active voices in the municipal government, kind of promoting uh, resistance to some of these recent events. And it may seem to maybe the uninitiated that, why municipal folks, who cares? All of this is happening in Washington. But I would encourage
hmm,
people to understand that municipal governments actually are the ones that affect most of what affects you day to day, and
mhm.
their voices are powerful in a city, in particular in this case, for motivating bigger institutions that maybe we want to also lend their voices to
Okay.
this resistance. And so it's been wonderful having them on board.
Excellent. Now, as far as logistics, people wanting to come down and support this. I know public transit certainly here is leagues better than other cities I've lived in. Um, are there any road closures or anything anybody needs to be aware of? What's the best way to get down to the event at City Hall? I would imagine SEPTA, which is our public transit system, would be one great way to get down there. What are the plans in place for people to be able to access getting down there?
Yeah, so for Philadelphia, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
I'm like a big urban development person. I love so I'm always very pro public transit.
yeah,
Um, leave your car at home. It's just a
yep.
pain to park downtown anyway.
You know it.
Um, um, but yeah, so that's a big thing. So for our site, that's part of the reason why we chose City Hall,
Yeah.
is because it's very close to a lot of public transit accessibility, as opposed to something like some of the parks in the city are just a little bit
Oh
harder
yeah.
to get to. And we
Oh
really
yeah.
wanted to promote accessibility as part, we want to walk the walk too. So we want to make it accessible for everybody. I forgot to mention this with the speakers. We will have ASL interpreters at
Oh
the
great. Okay.
event. Um, and in the other big cities across the country, same thing, take public transit to get there. There's options there.
Mhm.
We are, as the movement, we are being very conscious of accessibility to the
Yeah.
events. Some of the ones in state capitals are sometimes a little bit harder depending on how big they
Hmm.
are and where they're located. Um, in Pennsylvania, for example, is part of the reason why we have an event in Philadelphia and there's another one in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
um,
Oh good.
we didn't do Harrisburg because it's a little too hard to get to. We didn't know. We wanted to
Yeah.
sort of maximize turnout. And so, but
But
that's how I
have
would recommend getting there.
sure. I mean Harrisburg would have been good because it is the capital city of Pennsylvania. But yeah, it's in terms of accessibility. And folks, if you're going down, I know the Jefferson University stop is very close to where you're hosting your event. So that's probably the
Mhm.
best way if you're coming from the suburbs outside of Philadelphia, whether north, south, east. However, you get to the Jefferson University stop is the closest. And we can certainly put up a link for septa.org. If anybody wants more
Yeah, that would be great.
details. Yeah, I mean, like you, I if I ever go downtown Philly, I do not drive there at all, and there's no need for me to because
I
it's
live I live in Center City, so
yeah, you do, you
yeah.
do. But here up in Conshohocken and in the suburbs, we've got a great setup. It takes 33 minutes to get to downtown, and so the crowds. You did, I think Jay, you already had asked her about the crowds. You're expecting a good turnout for that, and the weather, I believe, is going to be holding up as well. So that'll Yeah,
Fingers
I know.
crossed. Oh
Fingers
my
Yeah,
crossed.
knock
gosh.
wood. Sorry, let me knock wood when I say that because we know how things
All
can.
the
Yeah,
yes.
good, excellent.
Yeah, we're expecting a pretty big turnout. We there is an Eventbrite. We are
I was going to mention that.
aware
Yeah,
that a lot of people, people can RSVP. We totally understand. A lot of people are not going to RSVP to
right.
potentially a political demonstration.
Yeah,
Um, but it is giving us a sense of some percentage. We're using
yeah.
that to sort of estimate, and based on
Okay.
the traction we're getting with publicity for the event, we're really looking forward to a big show.
And I
That's
imagine
great.
some local media coverage is going to be involved in there somewhere. KYW, which is the CBS affiliate, or any of the local affiliates, or
Yeah, so we are inviting media. We will actually the four leads. So it's the leads for the Philadelphia rally are myself, Amanda Rabinowitz, uh, Marion Leary, and Brooke DeLeon. We will be on WHYY on Thursday or Friday talking about the event to
excellent.
also promote it and have people stop by. Um, yeah.
That's great.
Excellent. Yeah.
Doctor, and I'm obviously anticipating you having a wonderful turnout and a successful event. Can you talk a little bit about the future of Stand Up for Science? What could be coming up next? Will this be an annual event?
Mhm. Yeah, so there's sort of two answers to that. One is the national movement has formed a separate 501(c)(3). There is plans to continue action beyond just this event. Much in the same way, so the goal is to sort of reignite the fire. I don't know if you guys remember the March for Science
Sure.
that happened in
Yes.
2017.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
was really
Yeah.
great. And there were marches for science in 2018 and
Mm-hmm.
2019, and then it
Mm-hmm.
kind of fizzled out. We're
Hmm.
trying to sort of, get that going again and get that
Reinvigorate it.
awareness going again. So this event will be kind of the big bang, big launch, get everyone excited and try to leverage that momentum going forward. I know in Philadelphia, our little team is also making plans to plan action and advocate for science and our org team we believe pretty firmly that part of the exchange here is that we need to use our platforms to do maybe a bit of a better job helping people understand why should they care about what we do all day. I mean, really, that's kind of on us to get out there. And so we do have plans. So we have plans for postcard writing campaigns, some other events that I'd love to come back on the show and we can talk maybe with my other co-organizers,
That's
and we can talk about what our future plans are.
that's a deal, Amanda. In fact,
Absolutely.
I told Jay that and Aaron and I spoke about this. Who's going to? Is it just going to be Amanda on? I said, yeah, because listen, I get it. To get anybody, just Jay and I coordinating to get together to record a
This
podcast
happened
episode.
fast.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, at the end of the day, you're a light. It's about optics for people, and in order for them to understand what is going on, what your role is, what you do, you among many other scientists, no matter what specific field you're involved in, it is about people visually seeing representation, and then you're being
Mhm.
able to show them, well, this is what we actually do. We're not just sitting in a cubicle all day long,
Mhm.
and in a
Although
bubble.
sometimes it does feel that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Listen, no matter what line of work you're in, I think we can all attest to some cubicle syndrome, or what have you, cabin
yeah, I
fever.
like that. I'm going to coin that term.
Yeah, cubicle syndrome. So cabin fever of whatever sort, but you're not just doing this by yourself, and it takes a village to make these optics come to life, and we really are 150% behind what you're doing. Science matters, and it has to be represented no matter whether you are the scientist or you're just there to show support. So once again, this event happens this Friday. As soon as we wrap up here, we're going to make sure that this is up and running. And Jay, thank you so much for all of the effort that you're going to do to make that happen.
Of
Appreciate it.
course.
But yeah, we'll have the rest of the team on because I know you do want, like Jay said, you're going to carry this forward, not just with this particular uh, event and the events happening in 31 major cities. That's incredible. Just to
Yes.
think of that.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's
how?
pretty. I mean, we've been firing on like all cylinders
Oh
for
boy,
since the Super Bowl, and and it's been sort of crazy to see the change of when it first started, and we started putting together, this is all the things we have to do, and it just seemed so daunting, and yet somehow, I mean, we haven't pulled it off yet, so but it's we're getting pretty excited. We're coming into a close. I think we'll all have a
excellent.
very long nap afterwards,
I
and then
bet.
Well deserved.
and
I
then and
bet.
then get up the next day and ride that momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, best wishes again. And again, folks, it is in Philadelphia here in particular, and March 7th nationwide, including Washington, D.C., and the beloved city of brotherly love here in Philadelphia. It's March 7th, and in Philadelphia City Hall, it takes place from 11 to 1. As Amanda had said, Dr. Therrien had said that this does take place with a series of guest speakers, other events going on. It is accessible to the public, so those who have physical disabilities will be able to participate. So check out your local schedules. Again, the website is standupforscience.2025.org. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So we'll have all those links below in our description. And if you're just listening to this on any of the streaming platforms, we'll have that information with the links up there as well. We are now streaming on all the major, thanks to this guy to my left at the top here. We are on Spotify. We're on Apple Music, iHeartRadio. I remember, Jay. I
You
remembered.
did.
Amazon Music.
Right.
And all the different places where you get your podcasts. And again, Dr. Therrien, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. This is going to be one of many times that we'll be happy to have you on to discuss any events or upcoming things that you have going on with this and anything else you care to share with our platform. And as I always say, a rising tide lifts all boats. Jay?
Yes, and I'd like to say once again, Dr. Amanda Therrien, thank you very much for coming on. We're looking forward to seeing you again, and we certainly applaud your efforts and the event coming up this Friday in Philadelphia, March 7th. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to say that we all have a responsibility to affect change. So let's do that. Take care.
Thank you